Have you heard of the IoT Watchmen? The two Robs I have on the IoT show today definitely are IoT Watchmen. They're observing, they're reporting on IoT, they're also contributing to making IoT what it is today. I asked them a few questions, including if you had a magic wand, what technology would you make disappear, and what other ones would you make appear or work? If you like this episode, as usual, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell to get notified when a new episode is published. Thank you. Hey everyone, this is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host. Today we want to talk about IoT's future. And for that, we have a couple of watchmen, the watchmen of IoT, the Robs. And so I will have both of you guys introduce yourself real quick, but I want to preface that in these introductions with my opinion and what you guys' role is to me, it's very important. You both are observers of the IoT space today in your actual role. And you're also helping shaping what the IoT will look like in the future. And that's why we want to have this conversation today about IoT in the future and how it's going to look like. There's also another anecdote which is interesting. The IoT Day event is going to celebrate its 15th anniversary this year. I think it's in April. So we'll be here for IoT Day for sure.
Exactly,
but we'll talk about that as well, as in, hey, 15 years of IoT Day. And the next 15 years, how they're going to look like.
Yes.
So let's go with some introductions. So Rob, so both of you are Robs. So I'm going to call Rob Tiffany, Rob T. And then we're going to have, Rob VK or something like that, right?
Okay.
That work for you guys?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
So Rob T, how about you introduce yourself?
Excellent. Yes. Rob Tiffany, I'm an analyst these days. I'm a research director at IDC. Which is one of those big industry analyst firms that creates reports and talks about different stuff. These days, I'm actually focused on more infrastructure that, kind of the plumbing behind a lot of that stuff. And I work within the kind of the cloud and edge group there at IDC. And so I'm focused on like kind of private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud stuff, which is interesting. It's stuff that we've done before. It's not specifically IoT. But it's something IoT could sit on top of. But yes, like Rob V down there, being an IoT watchman since I co-created IoT with Al Gore back in the early 90s, I think 92, 93 is when we built it together. It's been a long ride. And so lots of hands-on, being a practitioner, seeing what works, what doesn't work. From the early days, and then later on, working with you, Olivier, in the embedded world and mobile, and then Azure IoT. That was a lot of fun. Building industrial IoT at Hitachi might be the best experience I had, actually getting to create something from scratch and design the whole thing that would become a big success. So that was a lot of fun. And then that weird 5G thing, working at Ericsson,
Weird.
Flying to Sweden every month, and trying to get people to do IoT over 5G. How's that working? Anyway, that was an interesting time.
Yeah. You'll tell us how's that working, actually. We'll discuss that a little. To see if that's one of the technology trends for IoT in general.
Absolutely. That's all I got.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a nice that's a nice resume, I would say, and definitely justifies your presence here on the show to discuss IoT technology. Rob V, what about you? Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, I'm very happy to say that I just started a new job, a new position at Martel Innovate in Switzerland, in Zurich, and they also have they have a company in Amsterdam. And
is that with Monique?
That's with Monique. Yeah, Monique Calisti. Yes.
I know Monique.
Yes.
We did the session together in Denmark for an IoT week.
Well, she's everywhere, I would say, and yes, so I'm very happy and fortunate to start working with her because Martel's a very professional, good outfit with a lot of people and a lot of projects. So I'm going to work next year on projects ranging from what is called the commons, sort of like this digital commons term, where we try to sort of look at a lot of open source software and hardware, and also, which is this new term coming from KPIs, KVIs, key value indicators, which I really like. Is sort of this try to bring in. I think you can bring in things like sustainability and green, and through these KVIs that are going to be the same as KPIs. So it's really interesting. And then there's a very interesting project, because I think what was very successful coming out of Europe was this focus on data protection and the GDPR, and that's really sort of went across the globe, and then people started calling it the Brussels effect. And now, of course, we want to see if this Brussels effect can actually sort of spill over into more technologies and more standards. So there's a project with Etsy and Senelec. It's a very, very good standard organizations and very known standard organizations. And this is about looking about the space between tech and policy. So we're used to having technical standards, but we're not that much used to have like societal standards or sort of. So there's a very gray area in between tech and policy, and that's ranging there. And I'm also very happy to say that I'm having conversations with the IEEE on setting up maybe a new working group, which would be around this digital commons or around the pragmatic cybernetics, so sort of trying to build the kind of it's very naive and, and very fairy tale like, but trying to build a kind of stack for running a country or for sort of running a region. So if we need to have engineers more involved on that level.
Great.
I think sort of so. And then the other project I'm going to work on is 6G. There's a 6G for Society. It's called 6G for Society. If you Google it, you find the website. And that's very interesting, because that's sort of looking at societal development and looking at standardization when the technology development is actually happening. Because we can debate a lot about 6G, but I doubt there's anyone out there that actually knows what it is. But we can think about that.
Always interesting. Yeah, always interesting, Rob. So it's interesting as you both as what we like to call watchmen of IoT. You know, I think Rob T, you're more looking or observing the industrial aspect of things. Well, Rob V, you're looking a lot around the regulations, standardizations, things that need to be here and need to move the needle that we need to move the needle as well. So they're not like my fantasy or ISA. You know, these are things that are super important in my opinion, and I'm sure Rob T will corroborate that. Will agree on that. The industry needs to have these regulations in place, these standards in place, that interoperability is possible, and that we can all work together and all of that. But before we go too deep into that topic, there's one thing I'd like to do. So we these days say a lot that we IoT technologists in particular, we focus too much on technology. We focus a lot on the fancy new shiny objects, the next communication protocol. And we forget about the core of what IoT is for, which is basically plumbing to enable customers to implement a solution to address specific problems. And Rob T, you like to say, the simpler, the better, right? So what's your take on this discussion around focusing too much on technology? Well, first, from the industrial perspective, would say, if you agree on me classifying you in that domain, Rob T. So what's your take on that discussion?
Yeah, I think there's too many really smart people spending too much time talking about just the bits. They're talking about edge technologies, and I don't mean the edge. I mean just fringe technologies. You know what? Sadly, it goes back to my time at Microsoft. We had a lot of smart engineers in Azure building a lot of stuff, and they would spend all their time talking about why this protocol or this type of message bus or this whatever was so important and was critical to the success of IoT or all kinds of technologies. I, And I still see it happening today. Like a whole new generation of younger people are rehashing the same stuff that we burned up wasted a lot of time talking about a long time ago. And so when you're doing that industrial IoT, it gets more complicated. The fun, early days of IoT was just I'm building this one solution and I'm connecting a thing. However I connected it, I was just happy to connect it, and get some data from it, and that was it. But you have a lot of folks talking about MQTT, and a lot of people talking about the hundreds of industrial protocols that are out there that are so obscure. And a lot of people like to say we need to stay with open standards, so let's narrow that down. Well, the reality is all those hundreds of industrial protocols, those actually are open standards, and they're written down. They are standards, and so what really sucks for everybody. And I remember catching on to this early days of like when we were building Azure IoT. You have to support all the standards, which really is a bummer. I know we'll talk about that here and about the importance of standards and things like that. There were a lot of people standing by, holding their breath, like, I'm waiting for the standard, for the IoT standard to arrive, and then I'll dive in. And I'm like, well, you're going to miss the whole thing if you wait for that standard to show up, because it ain't coming. So working with IoT means you're supporting hundreds of standards, sadly, and you have to work with all of them if you want to be successful. And then especially in that industrial space where you're having to play ball with all these weird machines on factory floors, and PLCs and MES systems and everything like that, or you're in buildings, or you're in cars, or whatever. Every one of them has their own kind of bus or their own kind of thing. And so it makes life confusing, which means it adds friction to your ability to have success. I'm just totally rambling here, aren't I?
Yeah,
That's okay. No, you're good,
making a
Rob.
lot of sense.
It does, and Rob, I just want to, you were talking about the value that solutions needs to bring, right? That's the last thing you were saying, and I wanted to bring up the fact that we've not been focusing enough on the value that these technologies at large. You were talking about standards, but to me it's technologies at large that are put together to build these solutions. They need to add value. They need to solve a problem. They need to have an ROI, and we need to focus on that. And not that much on how. The how will come, right? Engineers are here to invent, to use, to compile, to put together, and it will figure it out. So the question is, how do we focus on value? Interestingly, Rob V, you were saying that one of the projects you were working on that's interesting, which is this KVI thing, where we're looking at value. And sometimes, it's value for an enterprise, making more money, saving here and there, but it can also be and has to be, how does it consume less energy? What are the values that we can also extract or add? So from your perspective, that focus on technology, you're working in the world of standards, right? A lot, and regulation. So technology is the focus for sure. But is it something that is diluting the problem that we should be careful about and focus more on that value added?
Yeah. No, I definitely want to make the case that regulation and standards should support production and not the other way around. It should not hamper innovation or sort of try to kill new technologies or new ideas. Or that's not the point. The point is indeed about, like you also mentioned, the interoperability of systems. And in the end, it's also that sort of, especially in consumer IoT, we need people to buy these things. So until robots come with their own sort of wallets and actually have some euros or dollars in that and start buying, apart from somebody putting that in, but somehow magically they start maybe cryptoing sort of some maybe they would mine some of things of their own and they can actually pay for upgrades. It's people that have to do that. So if it's not adding value to people's lives, or if it's not adding value to industrial production, it's like, for example, like what Rob was saying, like focus on. There's a lot of interest and talk these days about on water. Of course, we are let's say we're running out of water to a certain extent. It's cooling with a lot of machines. But over 42 or 45% of water in London is lost because it's leaking pipes. In certain places in Italy, it's 52. And sort of across the planet, we're losing half our water, clean drinking water, in leaking pipes. And this is happening every day. Every day, gallons of water are being sort of wasted. So I would say, sort of, if we would talk about infrastructure, if we want to talk about smart water infrastructure, we could actually just have a very easy value indicator of getting half of the water back that is now leaking daily into the ground, and this is clean drinking water.
Yeah, and so there is a financial interest in solving it as well, right? So because we often say that the value of saving the planet is something super hard to sell, at least to the older generation, if I may, but that's something that goes along with a financial value. You know, like saving water means saving money because that water has been treated, has been, brought there. Same for energy in general with like smart grid not being that smart and, having issues like Rob and I certainly, can report on the recent bomb cyclone that hit the Pacific Northwest in the US, where like 500,000 people lost power for 3-4 days, if not more. Because things are not super efficient when it comes to dealing with energy these days over here, and so there is financial value, that's for sure. But I'm curious, Rob, so how from your perspective can we move the needle with regulations? Do you think that can have a real impact, and how can engineers contribute as well to that?
Yeah, well, I think so I think especially in the latest AI discussion that we're having across the planet, I was having discussions or just nice talks with some Chinese friends, and they are studying now a dramatic increase in AI applications in Chinese villages, especially in the villages that are doing production. And this is just coming off the. It's just nobody sort of predicted this. It's just happening, and they're looking at it because everybody thought it would happen in the big cities, and actually this AI revolution in China at least is happening in the villages, or happening in particular villages. So I'm also a member of the AI Act Code of Practice, and the discussions that you hear there are very, very normal and logical. There's a lot of worry about people that they're going to lose their job. I mean, there's a lot of worry about people that this is going to take away their livelihood, especially if we see the revolution in imaging and images at this moment. And but sort of, I would say, wise governance would try to look at things and say, well, a lot of people lost their jobs in the factories in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution, and we saw new things coming and not new things coming. So it's very hard to fight the tide, sort of. So if you're in a position like that, it's very worrying. But there should be some balance in, and I think in Europe sometimes the balance is too much focused on risk and potential risk and what might happen then and there and then. And so we need a balance between sort of kind of sensible risk management that is not obsessive controlling, and allowing things to run its course, let's say, to a certain extent. And this is very difficult, and it's difficult to be in the shoes of policymakers these days. But it's
I think we're like discussing a lot about innovation, like what's the last shiny object that we need to focus on, new technology, and that's AI, Gen AI, and whatever use case or uses. But yeah, I agree with you. They need to tame that innovation with not too much, but some risk management. regulation, governance are things that, in my personal opinion, are super important to as guardrails, as things that should not prevent innovation, but should help it not go too random and wild. And actually, so like going back to, and I can't help it, I'm going back to the shiny object and the technology conversation. That's what's going on. I want to go back to you, Rob T. So if you had a magic wand, what are the few conversation, like one or two example of a technology or a conversation that is happening around IoT that you would just like make disappear? Like, come on, let's stop talking about this. This is nonsense. Let's focus on today's whatever we have and work with that. What would be these technologies?
All right. I just got rid of MQTT right there. And so all of our industrial IoT friends are going to hate me forever.
Nice. Controversial. That's going to be a short for teasing the episode here.
Exactly. It's like Harry Potter, so there's that. And yes, and we'll dive into craziness like 6G and other things. You know what? I had a real epiphany when the whole experience at Hitachi was over for me. And after being so deep, and I was living in Japanese factories, and we had to make it real. And that was what was great about it. But when I walked out of there, I had an epiphany that we were overthinking all this stuff too much. That interoperability, simplicity. I would always have flashbacks. If you're old enough to remember Sun Microsystems, they were a big deal in the 90s. I just remember I would always go to that Java 1 conference in San Francisco, but I remember going there, I think in 2001 or whatever, like the .com crash had happened. It's all sad. And Scott McNealy was the CEO, and he walked on stage and he goes, well, it turns out good enough was good enough. And what he meant was during the .com boom, all the VCs were giving millions of dollars to startups and saying, you need to spend millions on Sun Microsystems servers and Java and all that stuff. But it turns out there's always a barbarian at the gate that's simpler and cheaper, and it was called Linux. And it turns out that worked just fine for web servers. Oh, crap, And I remember thinking we are overthinking IoT with shiny technologies and people spending so much time. And I remember, do you remember the guys working at CERN who wrote a book about the web of things? And they said, let's just focus on W3C stuff. And I was like, you know what? I think they're right. It doesn't have to be the best technology, but what's the most pervasive technology? Because I often remind people, I was like, everybody's fighting over protocols. I was like, well, just so you know, the number one protocol on the planet is called HTTP. It's bigger than all the other ones combined times a million. It's just nothing even close. I go, when you talk about what works for everybody, because I started to wonder, why is IoT not getting traction? Why is it not succeeding? Are we trying to make it too hard? Are we by using the most bleeding edge technologies that only a handful of people understand? What if I back off a little bit and use good enough technologies that is pervasive? HTTP, TLS. I think we're on TLS 1.3 now. Sure, go for it. JSON to serialize your objects. I know that doesn't sound remarkable because we've been doing that forever. And when you want to do interoperability between different JSON formats, there's that cool JSONata stuff that lets you translate this JSON to that JSON. Just simple things like that. What was it?
Just to help you on that one, you say simple things.
Yeah.
Well, one could argue HTTP, TLS are not simple per se, but they are standardized. They've been used and abused for so long that they're known. They're a known entity. They are like supported everywhere, and they are used, right? So that's something to say about So it's something we can rely on. We do rely on, right? You do your banking over that.
Yeah.
So
if I ask the average person, like anybody who's been in the tech business for years, I've got a project. Let's say we're doing consulting and we've got to do a project, and I need to spin up a team, and I have to go hire people off the street to do a project. If I tell them that they have to be experts at Modbus or C++, I'm going to get this many people. If I tell them that it's going to be HTTP and it could just be Node.js or it could be some popular thing, I'll get tons of people.
True.
This goes back to the 90s. Can I get lots of Visual Basic people? Absolutely. Can I get a lot of embedded C people? No, I can't. And so that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah, agreed. And I would add to that it's going to be a combination as well, because IoT system solutions, they fit into a broader system usually, and it's going to be a combination of things where you're going to have these like field bus protocols that are existing, they're out
Yeah.
there, CAN, Modbus, BACnet, whatnot. There's going to be a bigger need, and it's starting to show up for edge gateways. They're able to process the data at the edge, to do edge analytics, to do protocol translation, and so on. And between that and the rest of the world, it's looking to be HTTP over TLS with TLS and standards or things that are becoming standards like containerization technology around Kubernetes and others.
Oh, that's another one I'm going to kill. I'm going to kill Kubernetes. I'm killing Kubernetes and Docker right now.
Okay, boom. That's your second one. Okay.
There's a reason. When I was at Hitachi and we're building Lumada and we're designing it, and that was the rise of Dockers and containers. It was before Kubernetes was big yet. You had Mesosphere and some other ones, and we did that. But there were some lessons to be learned there. All the developers on the team that I'd assemble, they're like, oh, containers. That means we could all use a different programming language from each other, and it doesn't matter to build REST services and all that kind of stuff. And they were really excited. And I just remember going, guys, this is crazy. IoT is complex enough as it is without you using 5 different programming languages to build one system. Pick one and let's go with it. So what did they pick back then? This is 2016. They picked Java. Java, the JVM running in a Docker container being orchestrated by Mesos. Well, guess what? It turns out it's bloated. It uses so much more memory and resources and CPU than you would otherwise. And so all of a sudden we're having to use bigger VMs in AWS. And guess what? Remember, economics trumps everything. It costs more money to run our system. And I would tell the developers, and Olivier would get this because we're embedded guys. It was like, I need you cloud developers to pretend you're embedded developers. I need things to be efficient and tiny because there's a dollar cost and a euro cost when you're lazy because you think resources are unlimited in the cloud. So Kubernetes, Dockers, all that stuff, kill it because it allowed people to go, because Netflix did it with microservices and everybody's like diving in,
Yeah, agreed. We're going to have like interesting conversation in the future because there's still this OCI thing that is interesting, the notion of containerizing to isolate workloads and so on. That Atom is a company that is building something really interesting for embedded, leveraging WebAssembly and some level of OCI compliance to allow these containerization on embedded devices in a more efficient way than a Kubernetes cluster or whatnot. Rob V, your opinion on or your perspective on if you had this magic wand, because we went from magic wand to laser guns, Rob, I saw you. But if you had this kind of thing to kill some conversation, some technology, things that you think are in the way, and let's remind what we're talking about here. We're talking about the IoT future as a set of technologies. What are the things you think are hindering IoT success out there that you would just get rid of?
Well, I don't so much think that it's hindering IoT success, but thinking about the 2 technologies I would like to kill if I could kill them. One was already mentioned by Rob, but the first I would kill is the internet.
TCP/IP. You were watching, it's just ended.
Well, I only wore a black tie once, and because we were all asked to come in black tie, and that was in London when I was invited by Vint Cerf to come to a conference where he and Bob Kahn were. So Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf were on stage because they were hailing sort of an anniversary of the TCP/IP protocol, of what they built, what they unleashed on the world. Now, if only 1% of the focus on AI that we have now was on the internet as it started, it would have been killed immediately by basically any government or any kind of big company or whatever, because if they would have seen that this was a protocol that would sort of be like wildfire through the planet in under 5 or 10 years, because it just says pass on the packet. and it could really literally just hook up any computer. Sort of, this is the most anarchistic protocol that was thought up or devised by anyone sort of ever. But I was invited because I was a bit critical, because basically what has happened with this internet is that as they designed the protocol, they also designed the notion of data, because they designed the protocol, so they designed the notion of what the data, what the packet was. Sort of that was, that was all in one particular place in one region in the States. So it was Stanford, it was California, it was. So Finsurf easily went to Google and sort of this. And then we had what we have now. We have Chef. Sort of this whole internet crazed through the United States, with the notion of entrepreneurial success. So it sort of all, I think GAFAM is now worth 7 trillion. Imagine if you could have spent just half of it on good public infrastructure, inner city management, sort of all of this. But no, we have this 7 trillion in the hands of 7 people, basically. So that was my point. Was it's a beautiful protocol. You did fantastic, but you didn't think about the governance, and you didn't think about this notion of data. What would happen? Of course, the Chinese engineers.
So what you're saying is not that much that you would kill internet at all. What you're saying is that if you had to redo it again, you would put more governance and some more guardrails, as I was saying, around it. But the problem is that it's in retrospective of what we know happened. Right? It's always hard to know in advance what's going to happen and to put these guardrails ahead of time.
Oh, but Finsurf knew. He knew. He knew. If you put out a protocol like that, and you just hook it up to all the computers, and you just say pass on the packet, and that's it. So the book was actually in sort of the printing press was 1452, and public libraries were around in 1900 or early 1900. And so it took about 400 years that for this book, this notion of data and content to be distributed across the world with schools and universities and lots and lots and lots and lots of rails and gatekeepers. And that may have been too much, because at some point in the 18th century, you would have been in trouble and go to jail if you want to read a book in your language. So that was way too much pressure. But here there was no pressure at all. There was just no pressure. It was just wildfire, and so it caught everybody off guard. And of course we wouldn't want to have the same rails that we had with the book, because that was too much. But we should have had some, because now basically we have three main visions. We have the Chinese vision, which is we close everything, we have a bubble, we control everything, which is actually not such a bad idea. Not in the way they are doing it, but in having that control on infrastructure and layers and services and applications for 1 billion people, that's quite a feat. So we shouldn't, not something to, but in a different way. But in the States, it's 7 people sort of running $7 trillion. And in Europe, again, in this commission, we have a majority of lawyers who, by nature, see things in terms of legal terms, and then have all this regulation, which you might call also a bit overdone at this moment in time. So we need a new system that's combining the cybernetics of the Chinese, the innovation and the resilience and agility of the American entrepreneurs, and sort of like the key value indicators that sort of Europe could bring to this situation. So that's what I hope that the new IEEE working group will be about, is create a system.
Interesting.
Wow. That is
Interesting. That's that's thought provoking, and I'm fairly sure that people will react to that.
You're gonna
Because I
lots
kind
of
of
comments
agree.
on this one. I'm sure there's gonna
Yeah.
be a lot of comments on this video for that.
I hope so. We'll see. We'll see. And actually, it's going to be interesting because the geopolitics, atmosphere, I would say, these days is such that, yeah, that's going to generate, conversation, comments, and so on, hopefully. But yeah, there's going to be an impact because if what it takes to sort things out, as in to clean up the internet and allow, like IoT in our case, to grow in a safe environment, like we want our kids to grow, right? So we want IoT to grow in a safe environment, but still grow and move forward. Geopolitics will have an impact. What do you think? Let's start with you, Rob T. Would be the impact of the actual geopolitics, and we don't want to go into too much politics themselves, but we know there's going to be impacts. How it's going to shape, the industry at large, IoT in particular, from your perspective.
So you don't want us all to get canceled by saying something too crazy, I just have to go back really quick though. You don't, in the moment when things are being created, you don't necessarily know in the future that it might be a problem.
I agree.
When I was working at Microsoft in the 90s and we used this thing called NetBEUI and NetBIOS, it was not routable. And we invented all kinds of ridiculous things like Windows Internet Naming System to make something that does a protocol that doesn't somehow route for NT servers. I mean, TCP/IP and the internet was like this most magical thing. And
Absolutely.
it felt to me like a democratization of everything. And
Exactly.
knowledge, and it was supposed to be this wonderful thing. And I know that
Yes.
it wasn't always wonderful.
But look where it brought us now. So
Yeah.
that's why I was also invited to this conference in London. And when he walked past me, he said, "Someone has to say it." So that was really nice. So
Oh my gosh.
because he also understands, of course. I mean, he's looking at the world at this moment. He's unleashed this protocol. It's really him and a few other people.
Yeah.
And he's looking at it and he's seeing sort of how it's brought to a still in some places and how it's governed by certain individuals. That was not the idea because the first text that Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf wrote was about an electronic library system. So this was all indeed about democratization of data and information and knowledge.
Sure.
And so, but to come back to this,
today these are important things. So geopolitics, we have conflict in different parts of the globe right now. We've got some wars going on in different places. This technology, TCP/IP, is how everybody communicates. It's also how bad people communicate. It's how people want to try to cut off that communication. It's how we, some of the best things that happened. Did anybody remember the Arab Spring? When they used Twitter to communicate secretly with each other, that turned out to be a magical good thing. But we've also seen governments literally shut off the internet to their own populations because they don't want dissent spread around, if that makes sense. There's so many issues to deal with. You bring up China that, they spent a lot of money buying Cisco gear to create the Great Firewall of China, right? To keep it all locked in. And, it's an interesting thing, tariffs, deciding who to do business with in different countries, who are you going to support with funding? All these things play a role, the way the world communicates. The reason we're on this streaming video right now is because of this technology, because of the internet, TCP and standards that came from the W3C. The streaming on the web is an HTML5 thing. Thank you. Of course, that didn't work out for Zuckerberg when he tried to build an HTML5 Facebook app for phones. That didn't work too well, did it? No, you have to have foster JavaScript engines, right? But all these things, I guess everything's a double-edged sword, right? It's extreme openness. It's extreme everything for everybody all at once, which sounds good. There's no guardrails. There's no barrier to entry. Sometimes when we think about, you're describing the old days and libraries, or there were gatekeepers. Only these people can have this knowledge. Not everybody can have this knowledge. Now everybody can have everything. So it's an interesting time. How I think of it mostly, I think of this technology mostly about communications. I certainly think it's primarily communications about people, but IoT is communications about things. And so we ride that same highway for people and machines at the same time. And so, when we're having issues between governments, issues between trade blockades, shut this down, cut off the supply of these arms or weapons to this country or whatever. All this stuff is behind the scenes. The supply chain, it's all running on the same technology that we were talking about with IoT. And it's interesting how it all uses the same stuff. Things are always going to be messy. Brussels can't, with a wave of a wand, change that for everybody, right? The United States can't change it for everybody. China can do it for their country, right? Inside their borders. And so there'll be lots of thought leaders saying we should do this. Our ability to have that go across the globe is certainly more difficult.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, but I think also what is already happening is like you said, we have, and like the 3-day blackout that you experienced. So I think what we see is what we're going to see is sort of these extreme hotspots where you got your 6G and your VR and your AR and this complete technified situation, and cold spots, and these cold spots are now sort of they are places also indeed in these places where war is raging, where infrastructure is down so where you so I think developing the tools and technology also for like mesh networking and more easy setting up communication tools in areas like this. That's I think something that is going to grow, and that's very interesting. And then I think there's going to be some real hotspots, which will also be in the Saudi region and in Abu Dhabi, in these places where there's going to be really displays of things that can be done, new things. But I think the cold spots, developing for cold spots, is as interesting as well.
Rob, do you think we're naive? Do you think as technologists and inventors of new technology that we're just naive when we build stuff and we assume it's going to be used for good or it's going to lift up society, not thinking about what actually happens in the real, sometimes ugly world?
I believe so. I personally believe so. I think there is a level of that. And we all know, some geniuses were just saying we're just working on technology for the sake of technology because they believe in it, they think it can invent things, and they have a hard time understanding or even like imagining that this could be used for the wrong reason or in a different way that they in mind. It's just like there are some people that they think that why would someone want to do that, right? Well, maybe you don't think like that, but they do have these kind of intentions. But I agree with you. There's some naivete in there. There's some aspect of it that if you don't have it, you cannot really invent. You cannot really innovate because you would be scared about what can happen wrong, and you would not do it.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I think so. When around 1999, 2000, I was first getting sort of introduced to this ambient intelligence, Ubicom, and I was very upset because I saw in a flash that the world would be divided into two things that could be read out and things that could read them. So, and I was thinking, what's going to happen in between? Sort of, who is going to fill up that space? And because there was also no governance or no thinking about that, it was really connecting. And but then through the past 25 years, where I've been working in projects with lots of engineers and computer scientists, I have not met one evil scientist, not one. I thought, is there a kind of plan here, or is this a like? But I just met very, very nice, very ingenious people that were, because of their interests, um, working for companies. And I thought that was logical. And then you get these big companies like the Siemenses and the Bosches, like 300,000, 400,000, and I think that you lose your individual agency in places like that. And and so I think it's not naive. It's a genuine wish to make things better, and to connect things better, and to build on that.
Yeah.
But I think
Makes
now
sense.
it should be tuned to climate change. This is our big, let's say, enemy, if we can say that.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
getting hot everywhere. So
let's actually close on that positive note. Like I was about to ask, both of you to have like this kind of like final word on how do you think IoT will impact the future? How it's gonna move forward. I'm not even going to ask if the word IoT or the term IoT will persist from your perspective. No, it doesn't really matter. I think I'm curious to have your perspective on how IoT will impact the future. Just in a few words, and I think Rob V, you were on that track, so just finish that thought, and that will be our closing word for today. How do you think IoT is going to impact the future?
well, I think we have some tools in our hands now, and I think IoT is actually the solution to a lot of these issues, because we need to know where all the energy goes. We simply need to know that.
Mm-hmm.
So we need basically. That was sort of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I read this kind of technical proposal, and in it they stated that whenever I would put my phone charger in somebody's house, I would get the bill. So the whole system should know that it's my charger, and that I got the bill, sort of. And that's very worrying in one sense, but it's brilliant in another one. Sort of, I think we need to know this. We have to have this full insight into wherever energy is going, and for that IoT is key. So
Yeah.
that's what I think.
Yep, makes sense. What about you, Rob T?
Well, I've been trying to finish writing this book called Saving the Earth with the Internet of Things. And Rob said he's going to jump in and help me out with that.
Yes.
Nice. Yay.
Because, as far as purpose, I started to think after a while, maybe that was the reason for IoT after all, was to help save the planet. And it's that remote knowledge, just remotely knowing so you can take action on insights. It's sensors knowing how much CO2 or how much methane or what's going on in the oceans. And so, as I've probably, talked about many times, I totally got into the whole United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Turns out IoT use cases can fit into many of those: hunger, poverty, climate, oceans, things like that. How can we attack these different categories with IoT use cases? Simply.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I worry, though. I feel like this technology can help. You still have to have people to take action, though. Of course, you got to know it, and then you can manage it and improve situations. And so that's the other part of it. But writing a simple book that's basically a recipe book categorized by the Sustainable Development Goals for hunger, poverty. Here are the use cases. Maybe they're related to agriculture, things like that. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Real simple. And also giving technology, like simple IoT platforms that can run at the edge. They're stupid simple. Then anybody can use them. Give it to them for free, along with this book, and have bright young people who want to go save the world and take that out into the field and try to make the world a better place. Now, that might be me being naive too, but I figure we should always try. you know.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let me know how I can help with that book as well, because I think we have plenty of ideas that we can contribute to that.
You heard that here, folks. We're gonna suck in Olivier into this project as well.
Yeah, I'm in. Count me in. Done.
Awesome. I love it. Cool.
Well, thanks a lot to both of you, the Watchmen of IoT. I think that we should build a club. I like that. I like this name. Use that and reuse that. I don't know if there's any copyright that we're going to be, getting in trouble about it, but we'll see. Getting in trouble is good, right? That means you have attention. Both of you, thanks a lot. Have a great day. Everyone who tuned in, thanks as well. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Olivier.
Thanks, everybody.